Welcome to the show. From Peterson's, I'm Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. On today's episode of You Have a Cool Job, we talk to Matthew Ranson, a fermentation scientist. Matthew works on projects that reach into so many corners of different industries, you couldn't guess they all come back to this one unique branch of science. He explained his role at Mascoma, the fermentation science company he works for.
My role in the company is part of the support team. So we do projects for all sorts of different fields. We do things in sort of corn ethanol, in pharmaceuticals, in probiotics, in cosmetics industry, food science, animal science, plant science. So there's all these different fields that we sort of get research and development projects from.
And with these different fields and projects, the idea is to evaluate fermentation issues and either improve a process or solve a problem. Matthew is the one that implements these newfound solutions.
Our role here is to sort of take whatever microbiology avenue we can to try to investigate them and improve on them. So like I said, I'm sort of on the support side, so we're not really pioneering our own research and starting projects on our own, but we're taking something that one of the other divisions has sort of identified as something novel or interesting and trying to figure out if that is something that can be improved or addressed or sort of teased out in some sort of way.
Despite the large impact these products have on products like dairy or beer that we encounter in our everyday lives, it all starts with single-celled microorganisms, yeast and bacteria. Matthew explained which of these microorganisms he works with.
The majority of things are Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is sort of general yeast that everyone thinks of, primarily used in baking and brewing and industrial corn ethanol, things like that.
Microbiology can be a bit overwhelming. To break it down, I asked Matthew what his job looks like day to day.
It varies very much day to day. I have done a lot of work with our sort of corn ethanol team, troubleshooting things and investigating new approaches to things, and also done a lot of support work with the brewing team here with some of our beer brewing capabilities and yeast that the company has.
What was one of the more recent projects then that you've worked on that you can explain a little more in detail?
So we are a subsidiary of Lallemand. Lallemand has a brewing division which, if anyone does any home brewing, they might recognize the Danstar name or the Lallemand name through that. Our group here has taken some of those brewing yeasts and done some bioengineering to introduce different traits that are not conventionally found in yeast, and especially in brewing yeast, and try to produce novel approaches and novel styles through that, which are a little bit easier for brewers and home brewers to do.
For sour beer fans, your world's about to get a lot more convenient.
So sour beers are something that are becoming a little bit more popular. You can find them pretty regularly from your local breweries and many of the bars around.
Matthew explained that his team is working on a sour-producing yeast, as conventionally, sour beers are made with certain bacterium. The problem is the bacteria is hard to get just right, and often spoils the beer if any of the bacteria isn't exactly the kind that they want. So, Matthew's team made a yeast that works as a substitute for the bacteria in sour beer.
With our sort of bioengineered yeast, we can do that with a little bit more control and a little bit more predictability. And I've been doing a lot of work sort of supporting the production of that, which can go out to breweries and just a lot of the quality control to make sure that we are delivering a good quality product to them.
As for the practical application of this lab-made product, things are a lot more efficient and predictable for brewers.
By eliminating the need for this bacteria and doing it in yeast now instead, it's a little bit easier for brewers who are typically set up to work with yeast to just continue using this novel and bioengineered yeast in order to do that.
Aside from working with bioengineered yeast, Matthew gets to work in other aspects of the brewing process, including tasting and the brewing itself.
I get to brew beer as part of the quality control efforts at work. So brewing beer is not the best way to do it, but I get to do it in small-scale batches in sort of lab-oriented ways. And then in some of the more typical methods of brewing beer and more typical environments brewing beer, we then also get to actually taste test and do some quality control in that way, which I think is probably not seen or supported often in many other lines of work.
Looking at a completely different industry, Matthew shared what one of his first projects in fermentation science entailed.
One of the first ones that we had worked on right when I started was involving animal nutrition. Essentially, the best thing to feed to livestock is fresh grass. In the winter, especially in sort of the northern United States, northern latitudes, I should say, you don't have fresh grass because everything's covered in snow. So a lot of times they will keep corn silage, sort of leftover products of industrial uses of corn, and feed that to the livestock. But if that's sitting around for too long, then sort of unwanted bacteria can start growing and produce off flavors, one of which is something called butyric acid, which if you actually smell it or taste it sort of unadulterated, smells very much like vomit. One of the unfortunate properties of this butyric acid is that when a cow eats corn silage that is contaminated with butyric acid, it can then pass that down to its milk, which is then delivered to dairy producers.
You can see where the problem is. People don't want their food products tasting like vomit. Matthew explained that his team's project was to find a solution.
So the project that we had was trying to sort of analyze the bacteria that cause this off product and see what conditions are going to produce more of this or produce less of this butyric acid, and try to find sort of the optimum conditions for storing this corn silage so that it's usable long into the cold months that you wouldn't have access to the grass. A lot of sort of slow babysitting and checking a lot of different variables as they developed, but ended up being pretty interesting in the end just to see everything coming through.
Matthew described very unique projects that are a result of an attempt to solve problems across industries and fields. So I asked him about his career path leading up to this relatively broad role.
My previous job was at an academic institution, what's called a core facility. So we had a specific genetic analysis service that we offered to labs within our institution and around the world, really. And that was very structured, very constrained for this one service. You know, we had a niche product that was very useful for the people that were doing that kind of research, and recognized the utility in having genetic analysis helping them out in their experimental design. So it was very much, we have a service, we're offering that, and we're sticking by it. I think that sort of service center approach to things really was an asset when I then went on to sort of try to move on to something in a different field. And over time, just from doing that service center thing, one thing all the time, it did get a little bit boring. So I was happy to try to branch out and have a little bit more breadth in everything that I do in the fermentation science side of things here.
Definitely. So what then is your education background? You explained a little bit of your experience, but what did you get your degree in? Where did you go to school?
Sure. I went to undergraduate at Drexel University in Philadelphia. I started off in biomedical engineering, thinking that I really enjoyed biology and wanted to sort of figure out how to design the solutions to problems, but then quickly realized that I really didn't like math, and that was a big part of engineering. So I switched from that biomedical engineering over to biology and graduated my undergrad with a bachelor's in biology.
So, Matthew, it sounds like you had a pretty formal academic background, and then it's being blended with this more casual field of brewing. How did those two worlds kind of come together for you?
The short story of it is really that it all comes down to connections. That when I was in my academic setting, just speaking with people throughout the department that were directly interacting with me or with my direct superiors and things like that, finding people that had a shared interest and branching out through friends and family and connections there to see what else was out there and what you might be able to do a little bit down the line.
As Matthew's educational background helped him find what he was interested in and open different doors in his career, he suggested that students take the time to experiment as well.
The important thing is to, during education, to try to experience as many different aspects of whatever your field of study is as you can. I personally tried to do every single laboratory course that was offered at Drexel when I was in school. So I got a pretty good idea of what sort of a physiology lab would be doing and what a biochemical laboratory would be doing and lipid science laboratory would be doing, and could get a relatively good idea of what sort of academic research would be like, and then like I said, those specific subdivisions within biology as well.
Matthew's job as a type of scientist reaches beyond the scope of what we typically associate with the field, showing just how much careers push through industry boundaries and allow us to blend what type of discipline we thrive in with what aspects of life interest us. We hope this episode has broadened your breadth of possibilities and inspires you in your career path. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.